In this video, we want to create together a fully functional and full stack CRUD web app using Next.js, Mongoose, and Tailwind CSS. My name is Mehmet and welcome to my YouTube channel. CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete, which are the four fundamental operations for managing and manipulating data in a database or persistence storage system. For this video, we want to create a book collection web app which you can explore the list of available books in your library, also add new books, edit and delete the books. Let's get our hands dirty and start with project setup and dependencies. Open a new terminal on terminal menu and use npx create next app command in order to download and install all Next.js files into your project directory. We are not going to change anything and we use all default settings for Next.js. This can take a while, depends on the speed of your internet connection. Use cd command and look it into main folder of project. Now we are going to install dependencies we want to use in this project like Axios, Mongoose, and Tailwind CSS add-ons. And initialize Tailwind CSS into the whole project by using this command, and we're done. Let's set up database by creating Atlas account. Search for MongoDB Atlas login and click on the second result. You can simply use your Google account in order to authenticate into mongodb.com. On MongoDB Atlas, you can create one cluster for free. As simply as click on Create Cluster and choose Free Plan. I have created my free cluster before, and free plan doesn't exist. But you should be able to see the free plan on the newly created account. Go to the database menu and you can see the cluster you have created before. Click on Browse Collections and let's add a new database for our application by clicking on Add My Own Data. Choose a database name, book collection, and a collection name. Click on Create. And here you see your database have been created. Database tables and information should appear in here after inserting data. On the left hand side menu, click on Database again, but this time click on Connect. Click on Drivers and select Mongoose. In here, you can seek your connection string that we want to use in the next step. Now we want to use obtained connection string to configure and set up database on our Next.js project. In Next.js, .env files are used to securely manage environment-specific variables. Create a new variable and name it MongoDB URI. And copy that connection string from website and replace this part of the string with your MongoDB account password. Let's set up our database by creating a new directory named lib and a new file named dbconnect.js. First import Mongoose into our code and then create a new variable, constant variable, and by writing process.env we can have access to the variables of .env files. By using this if statement we check that whether MongoDB URL has been initialized, or otherwise it should throw a new error in our console. In the following steps, we write the codes needed to set up database connection and cache settings. In MongoDB, models are typically defined using Mongoose. Mongoose is an object data modeling library for Node.js, where a model represents an schema that outlines the structure of documents within a MongoDB collection, including field types, validation, and relationships, allowing for easy interaction with database through an object-oriented approach. Create a new directory named models and a new file book.js. Don't forget the first letter should be capital. At first we should import Mongoose and then creating a new Mongoose schema by defining a constant variable box schema, and then define the fields of our database one by one. The first field of our database is title. We set data type of this field as a string and require true, as we want to make sure that title is always provided at data entry process. Also, you can add a message and make debugging and error handling way more easier. Don't forget to insert a comma after each field. We are done with databases stuff. Now let's start coding API routes. API files should be located under directory of pages/API. Create a folder with name books, and in this folder we are going to create our first API routes with name of index.js. Import dbconnect and box model we are created from previous steps. Then create an async function and name it handler. Define a method variable and initialize with data received from request. Call dbconnect function to establish a new connection to our database. Switch method with two cases. Case get case post and default function. Use try catch method and in try define a variable named books await books.find. This function tells database to return every result in book table and send response with states code 200 with data as JSON format. In case of any error happens, we use catch to send response with states code 400 and JSON with a message that operation failed. Don't forget to use break at the end of case, otherwise all other cases will run. This function tells database to create a new entry on book database with the data received from request body. In default section, we send an error message with states code 400 in case that none of those two cases above are met. By now, we have created two main operations of web application out of four: read operation and create operation. Now let's do the other two: update and delete. For this approach, create a new file in API routes folder with this exact of name. By naming like this, we use dynamic routes, which allows you to add custom params to your URLs. Just like the index.js we made before, we start our work with importing dbconnect and book model. Then create a function and name it handler. A method as constant variable. And this line of code to call dbconnect script, establish a new connection to database. The red line appears under the await because we call dbconnect with await tag while our parent function is not async. Just adding async before the function make it disappears. Create a new switch method just like what we did in index.js switch. Two case put, delete and default. Again, we use try and catch method. rec.query.id returns the value of id from dynamic routing, which you will see the examples in the next steps. And this section of code is responsible for update the code with a specific ID with the given data. By using this if statement, we can throw an error if book with that specific ID does not exist, and otherwise return data as JSON. This part of code call database to delete field which matches to ID that given from dynamic routing. Use an if statement to return an error while book with such ID does not exist. Here you see the other two main operations, update and delete. And we're done with API routes. Now the final stage of our Next.js application. Let's use all works done before and create our web page, the obvious part of iceberg and what you can see in your browser. In app directory, there is the default page. Open it and clear up all things. Start your code with importing necessary things. Import Axios and use state use effect from React. Create a default function and define main variables we want to use in our app. For this approach, we are going to use useState hook. UseEffect and useState is a React hook used to handle side effects like data fetching, subscriptions, or manually updating the DOM after rendering, and executes on the client side after the component has mounted or updated. It consists of two parts, variable name and set variable, that the first letter of that variable should be capitalized. Now we have to create four functions in order to call API routes we made in last steps. For the first one, create a function fetchBooks in async type. Use Axios to call this route. By doing this switch will be called, and we tell database to find anything in book database and return to our function. And then we use effect to set all data received from this endpoint to book variable, and we're done. Then write this piece of code, and we set fetchBook function to be called on each update of our application. Second function is addBook. In this function, we call the second case of switch in index.js, which tell database to create a new entry in database and also passes data like title, author, and description. Fine, now create the third function, delete books. In this function, we want to call the second case of this API route, which tell database to delete book with that specific ID. And finally, the fourth and last function, updating books in database. We call this API endpoint with passing new data in order to update and exist books. Now it's time to code the UI and use functions written above to fetch data and show them up in browser. Let's say our first word to the world and see what happens. Oops, we got error. It says that we are using component that only works in client. So let's add use client on first of our code. and it's done. Now let's define our divs and use Tailwind CSS to style them. Create a new input for book title. And name its placeholder. Also set value name. Let's set on change action for this input. By doing this, we call setTitle each time value of this input changes. Now copy this input and paste it 2 times. To create input for author and book descriptions. We have to be able to change these inputs values separately, but there is a problem. I forgot to change the function for each input. We have to set these to the variable setter. And now it works. Define a new button, add book. Add onClick function for this button which calls add book function each time user click on this button. Now we want to show exist books from book variable we got from database in our UI. Book is an array variable that may contain one book or many books. So we have to use a function that extracts all the books and render that books one by one. For this approach, we have to use map function. We map books to single book data, and for each entry we print this output. And now let's add two buttons for each book: delete button and update button. For onClick action, we call function made before in top of code. Delete box with passing ID. An update book with passing book ID and show user the prompts window to get new information to update. Soon I show the example of these prompts in the next section. There is a problem with this section of code. I forgot to use comma after strings. Okay, let's see how our app works. Adding a new book. Adding another. Now let's delete this one and update this book. Here are the prompts that I speak about before. Now you learned how to set up a full stack application with Next.js and MongoDB, and we covered essential CRUD operations. Also, we use Tailwind CSS in simple use case to start our journey into UI advanced styling for the next videos. It was joyful time with you guys. See you in the next video. Bye bye.